Howdy folks, LP Guru here, signing in for Let's Play Final Fantasy 1 Episode 6. We're continuing from the exact point where previous episode was paused. We have all of the magic that we currently need. Well, I shouldn't say all, but we have most of it. We'll be making a return trip in the near future to pick up on anything else that may be needed, but for now we're going to actually be exploring the world and attempting to continue to progress the story. Alright, so, well, let me not get too ahead of myself. I'm gonna head back to town and do what I have yet to do, and that is actually talk to everyone. And just like any other town, some of the people have useful things to tell you, others do not. Well, that certainly doesn't sound good. So far it seems like everyone is alluding, yeah, we've already gone down over there, so we'll come back this way. But so far it seems like everyone is alluding to some kind of major event, but no one elf will come right out and piece it all together, so it looks like we need to go and pay a visit to the castle and see what everyone there has to say. See if they can shed a bit more light on what may be going on. Okay, so looks like a little bit of information we need to know, and I think this one will say the exact same thing, and it does. 5 years ago. Wow. Okay. I don't know, but we got to do some investigating. Maybe see if anyone else has it's not really pertinent information for what seems to be going on at the present moment, but definitely something to keep in mind in the future. And here you have to hug the outer wall. If you step too far from it, it'll take you back to the world map. Okay, so there's another room that's locked by the mystic key and requires it to be unlocked. Okay, so we've been given one major hint, and that is to head west towards some kind of old abandoned castle. And sometimes it's better to simply go on the offense because we're facing off against an ogre chieftain. Very first time we've encountered one of these. And it looks like fire 2 did next to and nothing, so I will be eating my own words and trying to put them to sleep. Trial and error. Wow, almost 200 experience from that one fight, almost 700 gil. Wow, okay. So yes, this will definitely be the area to level grind. I don't need to get ahead of myself. Everything stated just a minute ago, yes, is our destination, but yes, I was just very quickly reminded as to how dangerous this area is, and we definitely need to level up a good bit more. Otherwise we will not make it to our destinations. Destinations meaning the abandoned castle and the other dungeon that is related to it. This is also a starting point where Cure 2 starts coming to the rescue. It restores much more health than Cure 1. Cure 1 is about to get to the point where it is used in more of a pinch type situation, and Cure 2 is going to become our primary healing spell. Thankfully, all you need to do is cast Fire 2 one time, and normally the rest of the enemies will be defeated in the following round with normal physical attacks. I think as long as you stick to the wooded region north, well, on all sides except for the southern side of Elfheim, you shouldn't run into anything that is capable of inflicting poison. So it's kind of a repeated environment. Okay, cursor, do not go crazy on me. Please and thank you. But it's kind of a mirrored and repeated environment to the Provoca area, even though I have yet to actually show any scorpions in the gameplay footage. I mean, I've yet to actually run into them. I haven't been playing any of this outside of recording either. I don't mean to make it sound like that. I haven't, but I do want to go back and try to find some scorpions so that you all know that they actually exist. I know I keep talking about them, but I've yet to show one, but that's honestly because I have yet to encounter one. But no, in this area, as long as you avoid the area south of town, you shouldn't run into anything that can poison you. So this is a great area to level up. Since we just leveled up, now we're in the 1500 experience point range, where we can level up again, but some of the fights have been giving us about, or almost, not about, but almost 200 experience, so it's definitely not a bad area to do a little bit of level grinding, and as an added bonus, it also gives a good bit of money as well. Fights like this, it's just best to attack normal. Try to save your magic for when it's really needed. I've learned that the hard way and in a lot of my different playthroughs. Fire 2 is very effective in this area on land, but it's only really necessary when you have multiple enemies. Again, a fight like this, even though ogres can pack a mean punch, there's only 2 of them, so there's no need in wasting a use of Fire 2 when it could be, better used in a different fight where there's multiple enemies. And when I say multiple, I mean Well, it depends on the enemies. If they're like the ones with multiple war wolves that we saw earlier, or even this one, even though there's not a lot, I know that the Gigas worm is weak to fire. So fire 2 should wipe it out completely. And it does. But fights like multiple war wolves, as seen earlier, that's a great use for fire 2 when you're encountering enemies that are weak to fire. Of course, that's even better because fire 2 targets all enemies and can easily end the fight right there with casting fire 2. But you just have to know when to use magic and when to simply force your way and use physical attacks. And it's all a learning process. I did it that same way my first time playing this game. Okay. Not exactly sure where the live commentary was lost. I just happened to notice that it was though, so thankfully I was able to fix it, but I'll go back when I review things and see, and if any kind of edit is needed, I will most definitely take care of that. But what I have been saying, just in case it was missed, is that you just have to know when to use magic and when to rely on physical attacks. And see, it's nice because we're already over 3,000 gil, just like that. So we can come back to town and look at any of the level 3 spells that we don't have. On fire 2 and bolt 2. Now it's just between focus 2 or bind. Nine times out of 10, magic, especially beginning with fire 2, bolt 2, everything like that. Most of the time those spells will always damage and sometimes completely defeat an enemy. So a spell like focus and focus 2 respectively, I hate saying that anything in any given game is pointless, but it's pointless. I'm just gonna say it because it's a waste of one of your 3 available spell slots. Because by the time you lower an enemy's evasion, which just means that it makes it easier for you to land a physical hit on them, by the time you do that, you could easily have defeated all the enemies by casting a spell that targets all enemies. Now, yes, there are some fights where, and by fights I mean boss fights, where it comes in handy, but meaning being able to, lower their evasion and everything. But if we're being honest, if you train yourself enough and push yourself enough, you really won't have that to worry with. I'm gonna check our MP count really quick. Yeah, we're good. No need to rest up just yet. But if you can be a little overpowered, that's actually the better way to go. But it definitely requires, patience and the follow through to do so. But sometimes magic can only help you so much, unless, of course, you are facing off against a type of enemy that can only be damaged by magic. And then that's a completely different story, of course. But in a general sense, magic can only help you so much. And really what it comes down to is whatever level each character is at, and their damage output and everything. That's one of the things that makes the original Final Fantasy so straightforward. It doesn't really, it kind of blends all of these systems in together, meaning, physical attacks, magic, everything. But for the most part, they remain separated. Now, of course, much later in the game, there'll be a much heavier variety and use of both physical attacks and magic-based, damage being used. But right now it's just rather straightforward. But there's also a reason why the game introduces certain factors and elements. All of these different ways that you're being trained to do different things will definitely come into play later in the game. So right now it seems kind of random that you're having to practice certain, strategies and everything, but trust me, when we get to those points in the game, it will make perfect sense. We're just a little ways under being able to get another level 4 spell, which isn't bad. So probably about 2, maybe 3 more fights. And we're probably about 4 or 5 fights away from leveling up again. My general rule of thumb is to try to be level 15 before taking on the rest of this. I had honestly forgotten just how tough this new area was. I mean, like I've said before, the difficulty settings always increased every time a new area is reached, but this is the first time where it like really spikes. It's been between Cornelia and Provoca, it was kind of a gradual increase, and then Provoca compared to the sea was gradual, maybe a little more than gradual, but the sea to the Elfheim region is definitely way more than gradual. That's why it comes in really, really good use to already have the shield spell, because depending on what level you're at when you first get to the Elfheim region will determine how much or how little you have to use the shield spell. But the positive takeaway is that if you're a lower level when you first get here, then it won't take you long to level up. But the main danger with that is you could very easily be wiped out and have a game over if you're not a high enough level when you first arrive. So just bear all that in mind. And it looks like I only have one more MP for Fire 2, so I'm going to go ahead and rest up. Rest up and save. Now I'll finally update the #1 slot, since it has been the longest period of time since I've updated that. And now that we are rested up and recharged, ready to continue the grind. So, one more time. Alright, level 4, I need 2 more. Realistically, just 1 more though for the white mage. And that would be Vox, and right now that's optional. And let me go back to the black mage. You know, I don't think I've ever showcased that you can actually kind of sprint. Yeah, if you hold the cancel button down, which in this case for the PlayStation 1 it's the circle button, you can actually sprint a little bit. Alright, here's the level 4 black magic shop. And sleep 2, haste, muddle, and ice 2. I'd forgotten what they were. So, out of them all, it will look like haste and muddle will be the 2 most worthwhile. So we will need to save up about 5,000 gil to grab those 2. Haste is the most important of those 2, though. So that will be acquired first, because even though I explained everything that I did about muddle in a previous episode, might have been the previous episode, it is much the same as the focus spells and simply lowering an enemy's evasion. If an enemy or group of enemies can simply be defeated quicker than inflicting any kind of status ailment on them, then it's better to just wipe them all out versus prolonging the fight. So, in some situations you do need to weigh out different actions. And what's nice about that, and about the original Final Fantasy game, is that you have plenty of time to think. Because unless you get in a fight where enemies strike first, you have all the time in the world to think. Nothing will happen in a fight until after you have completely put in all the commands that you want the characters to do. So if you just assess the situation, whatever you're about to be fighting, just take that into consideration. Like if you know everything is weak to fire, and you know that fire 2 will easily end the fight, just go ahead and use it. Don't compared to trying to use muddle and confuse everybody, just end it. Speaking of end it, I'll be doing that right now with fire 2, because the werewolf is another enemy that's capable of inflicting poison. I think it has a lower success rate, but I have been poisoned by them before. Alright, so we are well over the 2,500 mark. now head back to town and purchase haste. But we'll just have to see how long it takes us to get there, because I'm sure we'll run into a few more fights between now and arriving. Also, I would be very remiss if I didn't mention this, but after grabbing haste, the next to do will be to get the mithril sword, or mithril sword, depending on how you pronounce it. And no, I'm not going to buy it, I'm just... Okay, 3,200. I thought that's what it cost, but I just wanted to double check. So after purchasing haste, outfitting the warrior with his best weapon yet will be the next thing we need to do, because then ogres, and maybe even ogre chieftains, depending on how many hits the warrior gets in a single attack, will easily be defeated. So yes, much more land-based level grinding in this episode compared to the previous. And sometimes it's just easier to concentrate your attacks on the weaker enemy. Thankfully, everyone is well over the 100 hit point threshold, so there's not a direct threat in anyone being wiped out by a single hit by the ogre chieftain. Unless, of course, it were to be a critical. And yeah, I'll switch over to the world map really quick, because we're right here at this mountain range. That's in the gap in the mountain range, which is right where the cursor is. But once you head north of that, the encounters really become varied. So it's best if you have the patience to wait this out, it's best to not enter into this area until after you at least have the mithril sword in your possession. But right here in this area, the abandoned castle is to the north, and the next dungeon is to the south. But we must first go to the abandoned castle in order for events in the future dungeon to make proper sense. And I'm hoping and have full intentions of showcasing at least one of those two new destinations in this episode, but if not, then that will definitely happen in the next episode. Because my main goal with everything is to... Man, I can't get away from these things. But my main goal with everything is to have every episode feel authentic, nothing to feel, rushed or hurried. But personally, I'm not in a hurry or anything. So I'm just trying to provide the best experience possible. And like I said in a previous episode, please, sound off in the comments. I mean, if there's any kind of feedback you would like to give me, just let me know. Let me know. But yes, you can tell that the further we were getting from town, there was a gradual increase in difficulty and natural threat level of the enemies encountered. So that is the game's way of subtly saying, hey, before you venture any further than this point, make sure you're properly equipped and have all the necessary spells. That's the form of hand-holding that this game gives. But if you don't pay attention to it, then what can happen to you is not very nice at all. At all. And once again, the threat level of an ogre has been reduced to that of the crazy horse. How the crazy horse initially was a great threat. It dwindled down to nothing when we first encountered the ogre. And now, an ogre's threat level, I'm not saying that it is non-existent, but compared to the ogre chieftain, an ogre's threat level is much lower. Because a critical hit from an ogre chieftain can easily knock out either of the spellcasters. And that's even with our white mage having some form of proper defense in place. Alright, so we have around 2300 gil. Just leveled up, and we require right in the middle of the 1800 experience range. So we're almost there. I could get us to level 13 before we enter into the dungeon. That would be great. Because experience really increases in amount in that dungeon, but you've got to be prepared for it. Because, it's not really going to do you any good if you're dead. You've kind of got to survive, and not just one character. I mean, that defeats the purpose, because then that one character will be advanced compared to everybody else. And then, realistically, if that were to happen in the dungeon and you only have one character and it were to be like the warrior or the monk, they have no way of healing themselves unless you have plenty of potions, but I mean that's still very, very unrealistic because if they're ganged up on, if there's like 5 enemies in a fight, there's no way. So always make sure to take care of yourself and be properly prepared. I cannot emphasize it enough. Level grinding, no pun intended, or maybe all puns intended, but level grinding is the name of the game. That's just how games were, how RPGs were back in the day, especially the earlier games. But that's one of the reasons people love them. One of the reasons I love it. It's a classic to this day. Alright, so we're almost 2,800 gil. Okay, trying to get back to town and get in another fight. That's cool. And see, thankfully, you earn so much money in this area as well that frequently staying at the inn doesn't really counteract the money that you've been saving. So once again, do not be afraid or ashamed to stop. And I came here because I was thinking about buying another spell, but then I realized we already have haste, we don't need muddle. It is, well, we don't need muddle yet. So I'm not gonna get a spell just yet. It is the mithril sword. So I came here a little too early. I need a few hundred more gil. A few hundred more gil before I'll be ready to make that purchase. And yeah, see, there's just 30 damage to our monk. So you can only imagine what kind of damage that would have done to either of the spellcasters. Alright, so that should definitely throw us over the requirement. It does. 3485 gil now. Okay. Alright, what are we doing? Dancing? Come on now. Out of the way, please. Alrighty. So, our warrior is about to be outfitted, and you can see just how much of a jump that is. So he should be landing almost all of his attacks to everything in this area. Need to heal up, but he did take a pretty nasty hit. Alright, so what I'm going to try to do before I conclude this episode Then I want to try to save up enough to purchase Muddle. And then we will continue things into in the next episode. But if I'm not able to purchase Muddle before this episode comes to an end, that would be the very first thing I do in the next episode, in addition to showcasing the next dungeon and attempting to progress the story. That is always my goal, is progressing the story. Always. However, we have to be strong enough to survive all these different events. There we go. 2 hits. I think, based on how the screen flashed like that, I thought that was just a critical hit. Both hits might have been criticals. And typically speaking, in this game, a critical is just twice the damage that's normally dealt. And later RPGs in a general sense, but especially the Final Fantasy series, additional programming is added into how much damage a critical attack deals, but in the original Final Fantasy, it's simple math. It's a simple ×2. Well, I think it varies. I think it's like a times 1.5 to times 2 multiplier. I think that is the range, the value range for damage done. So it's not always guaranteed to be, right at double damage, but it's always guaranteed to deal, bonus damage, additional damage compared to a normal attack. Alright, game. I need to start running into some more ogres and things that give a good bit of money. Come on, help me out now. A whopping 6 hit points of damage. Impressive, Rosa. Like always, it's super important to keep an eye on health, because poor Sabin can easily lose at least 30 hit points in a single attack. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. As stated, I think, in the very first episode, possibly episode 2, as you stick around an area, or not as, but if you stick around an area long enough and you start, leveling up quite a bit, and as you continue to level up, you will start to come around to the other side of things, where certain, if not most, fights that once took a decent amount of time they are now taking it less and less time. And some enemies are even defeated by a single character in a single round. And I chose to use a Fire 1 instead of Fire 2 since we only have one more use for Fire 2. And we're a little ways from town. So 1906 is our goal. And 966 is the required experience to level up again. So it's looking like Muddle may have to wait until the next episode. I don't want to stretch myself too thin. So that's exactly how things are going to play out. I'm gonna rest up, save our progress, and in the very next episode, we'll keep at what we've been doing this episode. Hopefully not for too long though. We will purchase Muddle as soon as we have the money. And then I plan to head towards not just head towards the abandoned castle, but actually check it out. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in. And I'll catch y'all in the next episode. LP Guru, signing out.